In 1933, a loaf of bread cost 9 cents. Meat was a luxury most families saw once a week, so American housewives invented sandwiches out of almost nothing. Number 17 was served in every church basement from Ohio to Oklahoma, and nutritionists now say it was accidentally genius. Number 8 uses an ingredient in your pantry right now that nobody thinks to put between bread. And number 3 was so common it had its own nickname on every block in America. Some of these are strange, some are heartbreaking, and a few are so good the only reason you have never heard of them is because the processed food industry needed you to forget. Your grandmother knew how to feed 6 people with a nickel and 2 slices of bread. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 Depression-era sandwiches that time forgot. Number 25, the bread and butter sandwich. Strip away every assumption about what a sandwich should be, and you arrive at the meal that defined the lowest point of the Depression. 2 slices of bread, a scrape of butter, nothing else. In 1932, when unemployment hit 25% and bread lines stretched around city blocks, this was dinner for millions of American families. Mothers cut the bread thick to make it feel like more. Some sprinkled a pinch of sugar on top for the children, turning bare survival into something that almost resembled a treat. A pound of butter cost around 28 and it had to last the week, so the scrape was thin, barely visible, just enough fat to make the bread go down easier. The bread and butter sandwich was not a recipe, it was a prayer answered. The fact that it even counted as a meal tells you everything about what American families endured. Number 24, the onion sandwich. When even butter was out of reach, the onion sandwich stepped in. A thick slice of raw onion between 2 pieces of bread, sometimes with a smear of lard if the family could spare it. The onion did the heavy lifting. Its sharp bite gave the illusion of substance, filling the mouth with enough flavor to trick the stomach into feeling satisfied for an hour or two. In the rural Midwest, where families grew their own onions in backyard plots, this was a free meal. Mothers sliced them thin for children who winced at the sting and thick for fathers heading out to look for work. The smell lingered on hands and breath for hours, a mark of poverty that everyone recognized but nobody mentioned. Onion sandwiches showed up in WPA, interviews with Depression survivors across a dozen states. Nearly every account mentioned them with the same mixture of gratitude and quiet shame. Number 23, the sugar sandwich. White bread butter and a generous sprinkle of granulated sugar. This was the after-school snack for an entire generation of American children, and for many families it doubled as dessert. A 5-pound bag of sugar cost around 25 cents in 1934, making it one of the cheapest sources of quick energy available. Mothers who could not afford cookies or cake or fruit could always manage a sugar sandwich. The butter melted slightly into the bread and the sugar crystals crunched between your teeth. Children loved it. They did not know it was poverty. They thought it was a treat. Some families used brown sugar for a deeper, almost caramel-like flavor. Others added a dash of cinnamon when they had it, turning the sandwich into something that smelled like Christmas morning in a kitchen that had nothing else to give. The sugar sandwich disappeared not because it stopped tasting good, but because admitting you ate one meant admitting where you came from. Number 22, the ketchup sandwich. 2 slices of bread with ketchup spread across like jam. That was it. In the 1930s, Heinz ketchup cost about 10 cents a bottle, making it one of the most affordable condiments in America. For families who could not afford tomatoes, lettuce, or meat, ketchup became the entire filling. The tangy sweetness gave bread enough flavor to chew through without gagging, and the tomato base provided at least a trace of vitamins. School children brought ketchup sandwiches in brown paper bags, and teachers learned not to comment. Oral histories from Appalachia and the Deep South mentioned the ketchup sandwich more than almost any other Depression meal. It was sustenance at its most, stripped down, a condiment pretending to be a main course. Some families added a slice of raw onion to stretch the flavor further. Others heated the bread on the stove first, letting the ketchup warm through until it almost resembled a thin pizza. Resourcefulness did not stop just because the cupboard was nearly bare. Number 21, the lard sandwich. In households where butter was a luxury, lard filled the gap. Rendered pork fat was spread on bread with a heavy pinch of salt. The texture was smooth and waxy. The taste was rich and porky, carrying the ghost of the hog that had been slaughtered months earlier. Farm families rendered their own lard after the fall, butchering, storing it in crocks that lasted through the winter. A single hog could produce 40 pounds of lard, enough to cook with and spread on bread for months. City families bought it for around 8 cents a pound, making it the cheapest fat available. The large sandwich vanished when Crisco launched aggressive advertising campaigns in the 1940s, convincing America that vegetable shortening was cleaner and more modern than animal fat. Lard became something to be ashamed of. But your great-grandmother knew the truth. Lard on good bread with coarse salt was honest food that kept people standing. Number 20, the mayonnaise sandwich. When the icebox held nothing but a jar of Hellmann's, the mayonnaise sandwich saved supper. 2 slices of white bread, a thick spread of mayo, and sometimes a crack of black pepper. That was the whole meal. Mayonnaise was calorie-dense, roughly 100 calories per tablespoon, which made it one of the most efficient hunger killers in the pantry. In the South, especially, the mayonnaise sandwich became a staple that persisted well beyond the Depression, surviving into the 1950s and 1960s as a quiet comfort food that people ate but rarely talked about. Duke's Mayonnaise, a Southern brand founded in 1917, built its early reputation partly on the fact that it tasted good enough to eat on plain bread. Mothers kept the mayo jar in the coolest part of the kitchen and rationed it carefully. A single jar could stretch across a dozen sandwiches if you spread it thin. The mayonnaise sandwich is the one entry on this list that some people still eat today, though most will only admit it behind closed doors. Number 19. The potato sandwich. Leftover mashed potatoes from last night's supper spread cold between 2 slices of bread. It sounds absurd until you remember that potatoes were the cheapest calorie in America during the Depression. 10 pounds cost around 18. Mothers mashed them with whatever fat they had and served them hot for dinner. The leftovers went cold in the icebox overnight, then reappeared between bread the next day. The potato sandwich was heavy, starchy, and filling exactly what a body needed when lunch might be the only meal before supper. Some families fried the mashed potato patty, first creating a crispy exterior that gave the sandwich texture and warmth. The potato sandwich was proof that Depression-era cooking was not about following recipes. It was about looking at what you had and refusing to let it go to waste. Number 18. The bean sandwich. A scoop of leftover baked beans mashed onto bread. In the 1930s, a can of Van Camp's pork and beans cost about 5 cents, making it one of the most affordable proteins on the grocery shelf. Housewives stretched a single can across 2 meals. Hot beans over toast for supper, cold bean sandwiches in lunch, pails the next morning. The beans were mashed slightly so they would not roll off the bread, and a shake of salt was usually the only seasoning. In mining towns and factory cities where men worked physical jobs, the bean sandwich provided cheap fuel, enough calories and protein to keep a body moving through an 8-hour shift. The bean sandwich never got its due. It was too humble, too plain, too closely tied to the poverty that nobody wanted to remember. But it kept people working when there was barely enough food to go around. Number 17. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich. This is where things get interesting. Peanut butter cost about 15 cents a jar during the Depression, and a jar of dill pickles ran around the same price. Together they created a sandwich that sounds wrong but works beautifully. The salt and crunch of the pickle cuts through the thick richness of the peanut butter, creating a contrast that is genuinely satisfying. This combination showed up in church cookbooks and community potlucks across the Midwest and South throughout the 1930s. Housewives discovered it by accident, reaching for whatever was left in the pantry, and kept making it because their families actually asked for it. Here is what is remarkable. Modern food scientists have confirmed that the combination of fat, protein, salt, and acid in a peanut butter and pickle sandwich hits nearly every flavor receptor on the tongue. Our grandmothers stumbled onto something that nutritional science would not fully explain for another 80 years. The sandwich has had a quiet revival on social media in recent years, with people acting like they discovered something new. They did not. Their great-grandmothers already knew. Number 16. The egg sandwich. A single fried egg between 2 slices of bread was the protein lifeline of the Depression. Backyard chickens were common even in cities during the 1930s, and a laying hens could produce 5 to 6 eggs a week at no cost beyond kitchen scraps. For families who kept chickens, eggs were the one reliable source of animal protein that did not require a trip to the butcher. The egg was fried in whatever fat was available, lard or bacon grease or butter, and slid onto bread still hot from the pan. The yolk broke when you bit down, soaking into the bread and turning it golden. No cheese, no lettuce, no tomato, just egg, fat, bread, and salt. Mothers rationed eggs carefully, 1 per sandwich, sometimes splitting a single egg between 2 children. The shell went into the garden for calcium. Nothing wasted. The egg sandwich required so little and delivered so much it became the quiet backbone of Depression-era nutrition. It is still the best cheap meal in America, and always has been. Number 15. The tomato sandwich. In summer, when backyard gardens produced more tomatoes than families could eat, the tomato sandwich became a daily occurrence. A thick slice of ripe tomato, still warm from the vine, lay on white bread spread with mayonnaise and given a shake of salt and pepper. That combination of sweet, acid, creamy fat, and soft bread was summer itself. Mothers salted the slices first and let them drain on a cloth for a minute, pulling out just enough moisture to keep the sandwich from falling apart. Families who had almost nothing else could eat like royalty for the 6 weeks when tomatoes came in heavy. The tomato sandwich persists in the South to this day. a living relic of the Depression garden that has survived every processed food revolution thrown at it. Number 14. The pimento cheese sandwich. Grated cheese, chopped pimentos from a jar, and mayonnaise mixed into a spread that could stretch a small block of cheese into sandwiches for the whole family. In the 1930s, American cheese cost around 24 cents a pound, too expensive to slice thick, but shredded and mixed with 10-cent pimentos and a few spoonfuls of mayo, that same block could fill a dozen sandwiches. Pimento cheese became the signature spread of the South, showing up at church gatherings, funeral receptions, and weekend night suppers alike. Every household had its own recipe. Some added Worcestershire sauce, others folded in finely diced onion or a pinch of cayenne. The spread kept for days in the icebox, ready whenever hunger struck. The Masts Tournament at Augusta still serves pimento cheese sandwiches to this day, though at a price that would have fed a Depression-era family for a week. Number 13. The banana sandwich. Sliced bananas on buttered white bread, sometimes with a sprinkle of sugar. Bananas were remarkably cheap during the Depression, often selling for 15 cents a dozen because importers had flooded the American market through United Fruit Company distribution networks. For families who could not afford most fresh fruit, bananas became the affordable exception. The banana sandwich was soft, sweet, and filling enough to quiet a hungry child for a few hours. Some mothers mashed the banana instead of slicing it, creating a spread that went further. Elvis Presley famously loved his fried banana and peanut butter sandwiches later in life. But the plain banana sandwich on white bread was the version that millions of Depression-era children actually grew up eating. No peanut butter, no frying, just banana and bread. Sometimes the simple version is the one that sticks in memory. Number 12. The mustard sandwich. When the pantry was stripped to almost nothing, yellow mustard on bread kept body and soul together. French's yellow mustard cost a dime and lasted for weeks. The sharp bite disguised the staleness of day-old bread and gave the mouth something to work with when there was nothing else to taste. Mustard sandwiches showed up in Depression oral histories from coast to coast, mentioned with the same resigned practicality as patched clothing and shared bathwater. It was not good. Nobody pretended it was good, but it was food, and food was the only thing that mattered when the rent was overdue and the grocer had cut off credit. Children who grew up on mustard sandwiches often could not eat mustard for the rest of their lives. The taste carried too many memories. That sharp yellow sting was the flavor of rock bottom for an entire generation. Number 11. The apple butter sandwich. Apple butter was the homemade luxury of Depression kitchens. Families with access to apple trees would cook down bushels of windfall apples with sugar, cinnamon, and cloves into a thick, dark spread that lasted all winter. Community apple butter boils were social events in Appalachia and the rural Midwest, with whole neighborhoods gathering around copper kettles stirring for hours. A single batch could fill dozens of mason jars. Spread thick on bread, apple butter turned a plain sandwich into something that tasted almost like dessert. The spiced sweetness masked the monotony of bread-heavy meals and gave children something to look forward to. For families who made their own apple butter cost almost nothing, just time and labor. During the Depression, time was the one thing the unemployed had in abundance. Number 10. The peanut butter and banana sandwich. Combining two of the cheapest pantry staples created something greater than the sum of its parts. Peanut butter for protein and fat banana for sweetness and potassium. Together on bread, they made a sandwich that could genuinely sustain a working body for hours. This combination appeared in Depression-era school lunch recommendations as early as 1934. Praised for its nutritional balance and its appeal to children, the trick was spreading the peanut butter first edge to edge so the banana slices had something to grip. Otherwise, they slid out with the first bite. The peanut butter and banana sandwich survived the Depression entirely intact and remains one of America's most beloved combinations. It endured because it was engineered by necessity to be perfect. Number 9. The hot water cornbread sandwich. In the South, where wheat bread was sometimes scarce, cornmeal mixed with boiling water, salt, and a little grease was shaped into patties and fried crisp in a cast-iron skillet split open while still hot and filled with whatever was available. A smear of butter, a scoop of beans, a slice of onion, or sometimes just a pour of pot liquor from the greens. Hot water cornbread was the sandwich bread of the rural South during the Depression, cheaper than anything a bakery could produce. A sack of cornmeal cost 5 or 6 cents and could produce dozens of patties. The outside shattered when you bit through it. The inside was dense and steaming. Hot water cornbread sandwiches disappeared as sliced white bread became universal and cheap. But in the 1930s, in kitchens across Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and the Corollas, that little cornmeal patty was the foundation of nearly every meal. Number 8. The condensed milk sandwich. Sweetened condensed milk drizzled or spread between two slices of bread. Eagle brand condensed milk cost around 10 cents a can in the 1930s, and it packed over 1,300 calories, making it one of the most calorie-efficient foods available. The milk was thick, impossibly sweet, and it clung to bread like caramel. For children who had no access to candy or dessert, a condensed milk sandwich was pure heaven. Mothers used it sparingly, a thin line across each slice, making a single can last for days. The sweetened condensed milk sandwich was common enough to appear in Works Progress Administration community recipe collections. It vanished because processed snack foods replaced it. But nothing in a convenience store delivers that same dense, sweet satisfaction on plain bread. Number 7. The bacon grease sandwich. Every Depression-era kitchen kept a tin can or jar of saved bacon grease on the back of the stove. When a family could afford bacon, the rendered fat was saved, religiously strained through cheesecloth and stored for cooking. But when times were especially lean, that grease was spread directly on bread like butter. Warm from the jar, it melted into the bread and carried a faint, smoky pork flavor that made plain bread taste like a meal. A pound of bacon might cost 22 cents in 1935, but the grease it left behind was free, and it stretched the memory of that bacon across a dozen more meals. The bacon grease sandwich was the invisible thread connecting one meal to the next, a way of carrying flavor forward when the food itself was gone. Number 6. The syrup sandwich. Caro corn syrup or sorghum molasses poured over a slice of bread folded in half and eaten like a taco. In the rural South and Midwest, where sorghum was pressed locally and sold cheap, the syrup sandwich was an everyday meal. Caro syrup cost about 10 cents a bottle in the 1930s. The dark, bittersweet flavor of sorghum on white bread was a taste that defined childhoods across half the country. Some families added a pat of butter, first creating a combination so rich it bordered on dessert. The syrup sandwich was pure energy, fast and sweet, the kind of fuel that got sharecrowers' children through long mornings of fieldwork before school. It vanished as processed breakfast foods took over the American morning. Anyone who grew up eating sorghum on bread will tell you that nothing in a cereal box ever came close. Number 5. The mock apple pie sandwich. Here is where Depression ingenuity reached its peak. Ritz crackers soaked in sugar water with lemon juice and cinnamon created a filling that tasted remarkably like cooked apples. Nabisco actually printed the mock apple pie recipe on the Ritz cracker box starting in the late 1930s. Housewives adapted this into sandwich form, spreading the sweet, tangy cracker mash between slices of bread for a portable version of the pie. The citric acid in the lemon juice mimicked the tartness of apples, while the sugar and cinnamon provided the familiar warmth. It was an illusion, a trick of chemistry and desperation, but it worked well enough that children believed they were eating apple filling. The mock apple pie sandwich tells you more about the Depression than any history textbook. When you cannot afford apples, you build apples out of crackers and imagination. That is not poverty. That is a kind of genius that only emerges when there is no other choice. Number 4. The cheese dream. An open-faced sandwich of sliced American cheese on bread broiled under the oven flame until the cheese bubbled and browned at the edges. The cheese dream appeared in Depression-era cookbooks and women's magazine recipe columns throughout the 1930s. A single slice of cheese per sandwich made it affordable. The broiling transformed cheap American cheese into something with crispy edges, gooey centers, and a toasted bread base that crackled when you bit down. It was the ancestor of the grilled cheese sandwich, but made in the oven so mothers could prepare 6 at once on a single baking sheet. The name itself tells you how rare even a simple slice of melted cheese felt during those years. When cheese on bread is a dream, you understand what hunger really means. Number 3. The wish sandwich. 2 slices of bread with nothing between them. You folded the bread and you wished you had something to put inside. The wish sandwich became Depression-era slang across the country, repeated in blues songs, spoken word, and oral histories for decades. It was the darkest joke of the era, a sandwich that contained only hope. Families who had exhausted every other option on this list eventually arrived here. Just bread, maybe stale, maybe the heel that nobody wanted. You ate it because the alternative was nothing. The wish sandwich was referenced in 1956 Ralph Ellison interviews and later immortalized by musicians who grew up in Depression-era poverty. It was the meal that sat at the bottom of every other meal on this list, the floor beneath the floor. Every other sandwich here was an attempt to put anything between those 2 slices so that supper did not become a wish. Number 2. The peanut butter sandwich. No jelly, no honey, no banana, just peanut butter and bread. This was arguably the single most important sandwich of the Great Depression. The one food that kept more American children alive and nourished than any other. Peanut butter was shelf-stable, calorie-dense, protein-rich, and cheap. A jar cost around 15 cents and could produce a week's worth of school lunches. The government actively promoted peanut butter through relief programs in the 1930s, recognizing it as the most efficient way to deliver protein and calories to hungry children. Mothers spread it thick when the jar was full and thin when it was running low, scraping the sides with a knife until the glass was clean. The peanut butter sandwich did not need jelly or fruit or anything else. It stood on its own as the quiet savior of a generation. Number 1. The bread and gravy sandwich. When the Sunday pot roast was gone and only the drippings remained, mothers made gravy from the pan scrapings, a tablespoon of flour and water. That humble gravy, spooned over bread or tucked between two slices, became one of the smartest meals of the era. It carried the taste of Sunday long after Sunday was gone. One roast, one pan, one set of drippings, and somehow one more supper appeared. That was the magic. Flour cost almost nothing. Water came from the pump. But the browned bits left in the skillet held the one thing families could not buy enough of: flavor. In the dust bowl where cupboards were bare and hope ran thinner than the gravy itself, this sandwich was sometimes the only hot thing on the table. Mothers whisked it smooth over wood stoves, poured it slowly, and served it like it was a feast. For children, that heat mattered. The smell mattered. The simple act of being handed something warm in hard times mattered most of all. Because the bread and gravy sandwich was never only about hunger. It was about dignity. About making a meal where there should have been none, about refusing to let a family end the day on empty. Grandmothers did not call that resilience. They called it supper. So try one this week. Try peanut butter and pickle if you want the surprise. Try a tomato sandwich with soft white bread, mayonnaise, salt, and black pepper if you want summer. Try the cheese dream if you want to taste what comfort looked like before convenience stores and frozen dinners took over. Then come back and tell me these people were unsophisticated. They were not. They were inventive, disciplined, and stubborn enough to keep everyone fed. These sandwiches were not just odd little relics from a harder time. They were proof that survival can be sliced, shared, and passed down.